25-30, 35-40, 45-50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going running all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. Oh, no, they didn't. Oh, my gracious. Yep. How about that?
Well, the Big Ten Classic goes final in Eugene, Oregon. Knocks off Ohio State 32-31. Ryan Day still can't win the big game. We'll talk about that one that just went final. Penn State outlasts USC in a huge comeback effort, 33-30 in overtime. We ask what we make of Penn State's playoff chances and their championship dreams. And also, is it time to pull the plug on Lincoln Riley? We'll talk about that. And Texas shoves Oklahoma in a locker in the Red River rivalry. What, if anything, can we learn from this game as Texas moves on to play Georgia and Oklahoma tries to pick up the pieces of their season? With that, we welcome you into the Week 7 live show. Saturday storylines here on the Three Technique, college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes. Mitch Mason, Garrett Turney, and we are joined by our special friend Tyler Noe from Always Talking Ball. Tyler, glad to have you with us tonight.
Appreciate it, guys. I gotta say it's been a long time coming. It's been a long dream of mine to be introduced after that killer intro that you guys have on the show. So appreciate you guys having me.
Well, man, we're glad to get you on. Yeah, we've been trying to get you guys on for a little bit now, and I think it worked out perfectly. We have just a tremendous slate of games to talk about. You're available for this one. And guys, I mean, we've got so many games to get into. SEC Classics kind of left and right. We're watching Ole Miss and LSU try and wrap up here as we're going live. But without a doubt, the storyline, the headliner begins out west in Eugene. And let's start with our Saturday storylines there presented by Home Field Apparel. Use our code 3TechPod for 15% off your entire first order there. Oregon 32, Ohio State 31. Tyler, I'll kick it to you right off the bat. What is kind of your headline, your lead for this game?
I'd love to see it at least one more time, maybe two. That'd be great. It was, in my opinion, the game of the year. SEC fans may argue with that, with the Bama Georgia game, but this was just from the start to finish, just haymaker after haymaker. Back and forth they went, and even on that first drive too. I mean, Oregon, stood up to Ohio State, got that interception that wasn't reviewed for some reason. That was a very iffy call, and Ohio State goes down and scores. But in the end, it doesn't matter because Oregon just kind of, was able to hold on to the very end, unlike some teams have been able to do against Ohio State in the past. Notably, my Notre Dame Fighting Irish last year when they just couldn't hold on within the last 3 seconds. So I'm probably skipping ahead to the end of the game, but I'm almost wondering too if Dan Lanning, with 10 seconds to go, if he almost put 12 guys on the field on purpose, because at that time is not like time is the factor right there. You don't care about the yardage. If you put 15 guys out there to stop a play, again, he had 6 seconds left after that. So, it's only a 5-yard penalty. It's kind of like, at the end of a first half where guys go deep or something, just tackle the receiver. I mean, if it's 7 seconds left, then it goes down to 2.
Yeah.
Not a big deal. So I'm almost wondering, I mean, I know Buddy Ryan did that way back in the day in the NFL a couple times. And, Belichick's been known to kind of do some stuff like that and kind of play cat and mouse with coaches and everything. So I kind of wonder if Lanning had that up his sleeve, or if Tosh Lupo even had that up his sleeve at all. I don't know.
Well, that was out of a timeout too, was it not?
Gosh, I can't remember. It was the ending was just such a blur.
I think it was out of a timeout, and the broadcast crew mentioned right before that snap. There's confusion on defense, kind of alluding to, I think there's too many men on the field. Certainly an interesting tact, because Ohio State's out of timeouts, or I guess they have one timeout.
One left, yeah.
Right. Ryan Day is going to take that timeout to his grave. One timeout. they had wasted so much time getting to the line, getting plays off. You have the offensive pass interference, which really threw a wrench into the works for Ohio State. Before that penalty on Jeremiah Smith, it looked like Ohio State was going to cruise into field goal range. Now, hashtag college kickers, nothing is given anytime you send the special teams unit out there in college football. We know this. But at the same time, it just felt like, oh gosh, I think Oregon's played themselves one too many times. They left too much time on the clock. And I was already writing Dan Lanning's obituary. I had a graphic ready to go for Ohio State as the victor, thinking, here's another time where Dan Lanning chases some points early. They have missed opportunities and they come up short. Really, though, I think the story for this game is, you know what? Oregon stood up to the test. They overcame a ton of mistakes, and we can talk through some of those mistakes, but they overcame those mistakes, and they didn't let Ohio State play bully ball, which, you know, in my prep for the preview show before I was out with a fever, I was getting ready to say, I don't know if Oregon's going to be able to play ball in the trenches, but Garrett, they really did. They looked good doing it too.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that we highlighted in the preview show, was that when you looked at this rushing game, when you looked at what they were going to have to do to be physical up front, we thought that was going to be a lot of the difference, right? We thought the quarterbacks are going to be pretty evenly matched. It turns out that was pretty true. They both, go for 326 and 341, pretty even, both 2 touchdowns. But we looked at that rush game and said, whoever has more success here probably ends up taking the game by just the slightest of margins. And turns out that was right. Jordan James wins the rushing attack over TreVeyon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. By the way, not what I expected, because I thought the other 2 guys being fresher were going to have a lot more of an impact than it did. Quinshon did not have a very good game. But yeah, Jordan James, what a game. 23 carries, 115 yards, a touchdown. Almost, I thought at the very end we were going to be talking about, him not being able to punch it in on that last drive as the difference in this when Ohio State gets down and kicks the field goal. But yeah, end of the day, it was just the smallest possible margin here. Maybe home field helped a little bit, right? That might have gotten him that extra point somewhere. And then at the end of the day, this just came down to the rush game, I think, winning it out for Oregon over the course of the game. It overcame the point chasing. It overcame the mistakes early on. But, at the end of the day, if you can dominate, in the trenches at any, small level, right? If you can just find the ways to win the little battles throughout the course of the game, those will add up. And I think that's what ended up making the difference on that last drive.
Tyler, for those point chasing opportunities where, again, it felt like, oh my gosh, Dan Lanning's going to lose another high profile game, chasing points way too early. Hindsight 2020, do you still see that as an issue for Dan Lanning going forward, or is it something that you think is going to just be a part of the equation for Oregon and maybe even make them all the more dangerous going forward?
Yeah, it's definitely the latter. That's just his MO, and he did it last year against Washington multiple times, and it bit him in those games. I know he went forward on 4th down, I believe it was in the 3rd quarter, and drew up a beautiful play, hit the tight end in the flat, kind of, ran for 20, 25 yards there. But when it works, it's great, right? And when it doesn't, then he takes the heat. And obviously he did that last year. So happy for Dan Lanning, to get kind of that monkey off his back. It's kind of his first really big win of his coaching career. And yeah, you turn the tables to Ryan Day, and he's won some big games, but you just got to question him. And really in college football in general, you got to question coaches all the time and their decision-making and their clock management. But I think, with Lanning, it's going to be part of the equation.
So with this loss for Ohio State, I came in thinking Ohio State is certainly the more composed team. I thought they had been the more consistent team on both sides of the ball. Oregon had the sizzle. They had potential to ignite an explosive offense, and we saw that a little bit today. Evan Stewart gets going. Tez Johnson has some big plays. We talked about Jordan James. Which side do you come out taking more away from? Do you see Oregon as, hey, they've hit this next level as a championship contender, or are you kind of going back to the well of, man, if not now, then when for Ohio State?
I think I came away more impressed with Oregon than disappointed in Ohio State. But look, Ohio State didn't play a perfect game by any means, right? And I was saying it in the chat, but I think that last play is going to get way too much criticism. Will Howard played a good game. He made a mistake. I'm sure he wants to have that one back. I'm sure he knows in every other situation, if you were to slow it down and put him in the film room, he knows exactly what decision he needs to make there to let his team win, right? And he's going to get too much hate. Armchair quarterbacks on Monday are going to be ruthless, but it is what it is, right? But no, I came away a lot more impressed with what Oregon was able to do, because going into this game, I really didn't know how good they were, right? They kind of kept it close with Boise, and, they hadn't really done a whole lot to impress me so far, but being able to go toe-to-toe with who I think is still a very good, probably top 2 or 3 team in the nation, Ohio State, obviously they'll drop, but I think that's still a good team. They stood up with them and went 4 quarters with them and found a way to get out with a win. Yes, they were at home. Yes, there's going to be little things that you are going to say, well, on a neutral site, does Ohio State win this game? Well, if, that last mistake doesn't get made, well, if they don't throw the flag, which it was OPI, but if they don't throw the flag, whatever. I just came away a lot more impressed with what Oregon was able to do, as opposed to just upset with saying, Ohio State, you blew it, you didn't get there. This is still wide open. And, like our friends over at Walk on Redshirt said, a couple minutes before the show started, they can still lose another game and still be fine and make the playoff. And so this is why I like this new format so much, is because, you get to say, hey, you made a mistake. You didn't come out on top for this one, but your season isn't over. And, hopefully, like you were saying off the top, Ty, we get to see this one another couple of times, because this was what college football is supposed to be. And I hope that we get to see this rematch at some point.
It's ironic. I changed my prediction for this game. Garrett, we talked about it on Monday when we were breaking down the playoff bracket at the halfway point. I said that Ohio State was going to win this game, but in the preseason, I had picked them to drop this game, run the table, get revenge on the Ducks in Indianapolis. Shouldn't have backed off that take, evidently. I had it pegged right the first time.
Stay the course, Mitch.
I evidently trust the gut, not my eyes. For Oregon, though, their remaining schedule, guys, Purdue, Illinois, at Michigan, Maryland, at Wisconsin, home against Washington. There's not a team on that schedule that scares me, to be quite honest. I guess maybe going to the Big House, but I think Texas showed you the blueprint to beat the Wolverines in their house. So, Tyler, I mean, is there a natural landmine where Oregon stubs their toe, or is this kind of full steam ahead into Indianapolis?
No, I'm with you. I mean, preseason, I picked Oregon to go 12-0. They were the only team I picked to go undefeated in the country. And again, I picked Ohio State to get revenge in the Big Ten championship. And again, like an idiot this morning, I bet, Ohio State -2.5. So that schedule, Michigan is the toughest remaining game. And I don't know if anybody really thinks Michigan's, that serious of a team this year. We'll see what Tuttle does next week. But I just think that the changes that Oregon has made, the change they made after week 2 on the offensive line, moving the center to the right guard and the right guard to the center. And I mean, that offensive line, they didn't allow Ohio State to get any pressure with 4 rushers tonight. They didn't allow any sacks. When Gabriel has time, he can launch those deep balls and be pretty accurate with them, which has been kind of his hiccup this year. And he can hit the crossing routes. We know that he's a very accurate quarterback. And so I think with their remaining schedule, if they do not end up with a spot in Lucas Oil, it'll be surprising. And I think with both these teams, it'll be surprising if we don't see both of them in the playoff.
That's where I am too. I mean, gosh, Will Howard, man, you guys said it. The last play, really the last drive, I felt like he fell asleep at the wheel a little bit. The moment was a little too big for him. But the rest of the game, 28 of 35, 326, 2 touchdowns, does not throw a pick. Dylan Gabriel, 23 of 34, 341, 2 touchdowns, averaged 10 yards a pass. And to your point, Tyler, the offensive line allowed him enough time to, what the broadcast pointed out, navigate that pocket, be comfortable in a mobile capacity to not only use his legs, but also position himself to throw the ball down the field. Evan Stewart catch a 69, Tez Johnson catch a 48, Terrence Ferguson catch a 32, Trayshawn Holden, before he got kicked out for spitting on a DB, catch a 32. So you're right. I mean, the offensive line clearly is headed in this right direction. And now that they've got the running game going along with it, the defense stepped up. They did not allow Ohio State to dominate on the ground, which was a concern of mine in the weeks leading up. I mean, it felt like the Ducks put it all together for one perfect weekend under the lights in Autzen Stadium. Now, we know college football is a fickle beast, and it doesn't matter if you're favored by 1 or favored by 100. Any given Saturday, you can line up and lose one. So now that Dan Lanning and the Ducks have a taste of success, have that big win in the regular season, I'm curious to see, do you continue to put it together? How do you handle being at the top? Because, guys, for me, Oregon's going to move up to 2. They're going to be behind Texas until Texas loses, if that happens. I just think with the remaining schedule for Oregon, the remaining schedule for Texas, I think there's enough juice behind the Longhorns to where they're going to stay on number 1 until they lose that, right? But for me, I think Oregon is that next team that I'd pick that I'd feel really good about winning a national championship. Maybe Ohio State slid down to number 3. How would you guys order your top 3 national championship favorites at this point?
Maybe I'm wrong for this. I still like the Buckeyes. That was kind of my preseason pick, and I'm still in on the Buckeyes to go and take this out. So I think they're the best team right now. I think they're the most complete team, and I think this is one of those like moments where they get to say, you know what, this is bad. We made our mistakes. Let's get super motivated, right? Let's go take that bad taste in our mouth. Want to take it to them back at the end of the season when we play them in the Big Ten championship, and we'll go, put it to them there. And, then at that point you get to go get whatever your seed is and rock and roll in the playoff. And I think that this is as good a chance as they're going to have. It's as good of a roster, I think, as I've had in a little while. They're, super talented. And if they can't get it done this year, that's one of those, if not now, win situations for Ohio State, at least in my opinion. So I still like the Buckeyes most right now. I understand they just lost, and probably we got Oregon fans watching this. They're what do you mean they just I'm not claiming I'm Josh Payton, just saying that I'm going to ignore results on the field. I just think that it's a tough road game and you lost by 1. I'm going to give you a little bit of slack for that. I also have seen, and this might be, I don't have the final number on that after today, but teams that cross the country in the Big Ten won like 1 game going into today. Yeah. It doesn't matter who's playing or how they look. You don't win when you cross the country from the Midwest to the other side of Big Ten country over there on the West Coast. So it just isn't something that happens a lot. I know there's a couple road wins today on that, but I think this is a very good Ohio State team. I'd probably put them at 1, and Texas and Oregon probably right behind them. But for me, it almost feels like a 1A, 1B, 1C, because they're all just kind of the cream of the crop. And then after that, I don't really know what there is left in college football.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you on that. They're kind of all that's the top tier right now in college football. What I will say, and people will laugh at me, in 6 days from now, Oregon will make the cross-country trek to West Lafayette, Indiana. Yeah. They're going to play a Purdue team that turned it on in the second half today against Illinois, and they've been known to be giant killers before. I know they've taken their licks so far this season, but as we've seen with Alabama and with Notre Dame, you get up for a big win. It is really hard to bring yourself back up to that level, especially when you're going on the road, and they're probably going to be 28, 30-point favorites at least in that game.
So wait, I want to flesh this out a little bit. You're telling me that a team that just lost in overtime, that wears black and gold and is traditionally a perennial bottom feeder of their conference, is playing a team coming off of a massive win that was televised to the nation like that? I've seen crazier things before. We're about to see a field storming in West Lafayette, I guess.
I'm just saying, watch out.
I'm liking this.
Ryan Brown had himself a day, true freshman, I believe, for Purdue, 297 yards, 3 touchdowns. Guys, they should have won that game against Illinois. Not only did Illinois blow that lead, but going for 2 was what cost the Boilermakers that game. They had the running back wide open in the flat. I mean, they motioned him out. They got exactly what they wanted. They ran a little rub route. They got what they wanted. They didn't throw the ball to him. Mm-hmm. I like that. We'll see how much juice Oregon takes cross country next week. All right, let's move on to Penn State and USC. Penn State wins by 3 in overtime. The first half, this felt like, oh my gosh, James Franklin's done it again. He's found a way to come out flat in another big game, traveling across country or not. I mean, this is why I closed the window infamously in the offseason on Penn State's championship hopes, because I just didn't think that they were going to be able to win enough of these big games. But to their credit, they come back, they find a way to beat the Trojans. What do we make, though, of Penn State's continued struggles against teams with a pulse? USC is not even that good of a team, I don't think. They have really good pieces. They have some good things going for them, but oh my goodness, Penn State refuses to put together a complete performance against a team with a winning record.
Yeah, they like to play up or down to their competition. It feels like they really like to just show up for a game, and it's almost like they understand that they're entertainment and they're on TV and they're like, oh, we're going to give you a show. All right. Bowling Green's coming to town. You want to watch a good football game today? Here we go. And it almost seems like that's what they want to give us. And so we appreciate you from like an entertainment perspective, but dang it, Penn State, like, come on. Like, we know they're better than this. And one of the things that I brought up going into this game was, Penn State's looking really good. They're the better team. They really shouldn't struggle in this. One of the things I wanted to see was, Drew Aller. I wanted to see him kind of let it rip a little bit, right? I wanted to see him start to throw that thing a little further down the field and put up some big passing numbers. It felt like he was kind of waiting to break out in that. And oh boy, did he let it rip, just not always to the right team. He goes for 391, 2 touchdowns, and I'm looking at that saying, hey, not bad. And then you got to see that 3 in the interceptions column and say, oh, Drew, what are we doing here, buddy? What is the problem? And so I'm glad he was letting it rip, and I'm glad that was, kind of what they needed to do to get back into this game. But yeah, man, like, why be in that spot in the first place, right? Why did you get yourself into this position in the first place? And I'm asking them, what did I see today that makes me think Penn State's going to go compete for this thing? Because yeah, they get to play up and down, but you play a team like Ohio State, and they're going to make you pay for that. And you go throw 3 picks against Ohio State, they'll say, thank you, and go take those all to the house and, convert those into touchdowns on the ensuing drives. And then that's it. So I am really nervous about Penn State. I think they're a good football team. Like, I really think they're a good football team. I think they got the pieces. I've seen them play well, but I mean, come on, win a game by a big margin, win a game against a quality team by a big margin. I don't even know if you can call USC a quality team, but like, win a game that we're expecting you to win by a couple of touchdowns, please.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the problem. Like, they're always just a good football team. And yeah, they beat the teams they're supposed to beat. They lose to Michigan. They lose to Ohio State. I'm going to cut them a little slack because obviously, Vegas had them favored by 3.5, 4 points. They won by 3. That's pretty much kind of on par. And, we can blame it on jet lag, maybe. You can blame it on, whatever you want to in the first half, just kind of asleep at the wheel. But they just, again, in the second half, they turned it on. The problem with Penn State is in their offense is they don't have, other than Tyler Warren, obviously, and we'll get to him here in a second, but they've got, before him, they've got 2 playmakers on their offense, and they're not at wide receiver. It's Katron Allen and it's Nick Singleton. And it's kind of the same deal with Alabama. You got 2 guys on your offense. It's Jalen Milroe and Ryan Williams. If you neutralize those guys or one of those guys, who do you go to? And we saw a couple of catches from Julian Fleming. We thought he'd be a lot more involved in the offense by now, but big catches from him down the stretch. But I'm still just worried in the future, obviously, for that Ohio State game coming up in a couple of weeks. But I don't see where Aller's going to be able to go when he gets in trouble, when he gets all, happy feet back there.
Mm-hmm. That loss, losing Keandre Lambert-Smith after spring was devastating, right? And you mentioned Julian Fleming, former 5-star from Pennsylvania, went to Ohio State, didn't really do a ton there, comes back home. It's supposed to be this reunion. 2 catches for 33 yards today, and they're important catches. They're both on 4th down, if I'm not mistaken. I know the second one was for sure the game extender on 4th and long there. So, contributing when the team needed it the most. But you're right. Like, other than Tyler Warren, who, I mean, just spoiler, my water cooler hero of the week, 17 catches, 224 yards as a tight end and a tutter. He also, oh, by the way, throws a completion for 9 yards in that game. I mean, the guy just did everything. It was incredible how USC could not figure out where 44 was at any given time. I mean, normally it's a little bit more difficult when you've got, okay, all right, Jeremiah Smith, right, for Ohio State. Yeah, it's a little hard to contain him. You can know where he is, but boy, he's like smoke. You just can't ever catch him. We're talking about a tight end, guys. I mean, just double team him, throw a safety on him, figure it out. USC didn't do that. Tyler, you mentioned Penn State comes roaring out of the half. They're down 20-6 at the half. I really was concerned if the Nittany Lions were even going to be able to limp out of the locker room in the second half, but they do. They roar back. They win the third quarter. USC, I was more disappointed with how their defense failed to adjust early on in that second half. But then even still, guys, USC has every chance to win this stinking game. Aller throws another interception, throws it into real tight coverage. Ball gets tipped, picked off, third pick of the day. Woody Marks is running rampant for USC. Nobody has an answer for him in white. And still, Lincoln Riley finds a way to fumble this game away. Can anyone explain to me the rationale of why USC is draining the clock? They're still 15 yards away from field goal range. And again, hashtag college kickers, not exactly playing to win there. But Lincoln Riley and Miller Moss drain the clock. They run like a minute off the clock. And then Miller Moss finally snaps the ball and throws an interception. We go to overtime. Obviously, they lose. Again, they miss a field goal, a much shorter field goal than what they were trying to line up for in the first place. I don't know what to do with Lincoln Riley. And if we've got Penn State comments still, I mean, feel free to throw in anything you've got on the Nittany Lions. But I don't know what you do if you're USC. I think Lincoln Riley has exposed himself as a fraud at this point.
What you do is you acknowledge that Lincoln Riley was a product of Stoops at Oklahoma, and that's about it. This is his first season where, Stoops at Oklahoma hasn't had any real impact on him and his legacy. Remember, he had a lot of what his program was just kind of there, and he kind of got to just pilot that thing. And it worked. He kept the offense rolling, and things were still going well. But after all those players and all the cachet that came with Oklahoma left, and you finally got, quarterbacks are out, all the guys that came with you are kind of gone. What do you have? You have, a not very consistent team. You have a team that you think you're coaching up, and, Miller Moss, not necessarily a bad quarterback, but, not anything that I'm going to write home about. And he's had some good performances. He had some bad performances. I'm just not impressed with what Lincoln Riley's doing. You can't convince me he's a great head coach. And, I know that there's speculation about the NFL, and maybe someone's going to be foolish enough to take it, but I think he just kind of smells like Cliff Kingsbury right now. And I think a lot of teams are going to be hesitant to jump all over that.
Yeah, and I know, like in the second half, obviously Penn State made some adjustments at halftime, but it just seemed like he kind of went away from what was working for him in the first half and the misdirection. And in that first half, USC looked so much faster than Penn State. I mean, that was the worry with those teams from the West Coast coming into the Midwest. Were they going to be so much faster with their athletes? And I mean, that looked to be the case in that first half. And then it just seemed like he stopped getting his guys in space. Yeah, Penn State made some adjustments, and then to your point on that last drive with, him just draining the clock, I'm confused as why James Franklin called a timeout. I mean, it lucked out because Miller Moss could have completed a pass, and they still had 3 timeouts left. He could have called a timeout, and they could have got a game-winning field goal. So it was clock management issues from both coaches, like it usually is with those two guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I'm with Garrett on Penn State or on USC. I don't see it right now for Riley. And I heard Josh Pate, on his show this week, kind of making the case for him, saying it was he's in the year 1 of his rebuild, and it's in year 3. But I'm like, you hired those coaches. You were the ones who hired Alex Grinch and kept him on for 2 years. Yeah. Don't just give him a pass because he made a terrible hire and finally corrected it with D'Anton Lynn.
That's the exact same attitude that says, well, Jimbo Fisher was year 6 of a rebuild. I'm like, you hired the people around you. Lincoln Riley doesn't get a pass on this one. Like, you had a legendary quarterback in this game that kind of floated you to some wins your first couple of years. By the way, followed you over from Oklahoma. So that's why I'm talking about the whole Stoops legacy thing. Like, it's, you have nothing that you've really earned on your own, just through your own sort of, abilities as a coach, your own abilities as a recruiter. This is like definitionally born on third base and then decided to, go out to the coast and take a bunch of money. And turns out it didn't really work out. Grass wasn't greener. And maybe that's why he left, right? We talked about it at the time. Maybe he's leaving because he knows OU's going to the SEC and he wants to get out the way. I think there's kind of a point there. Like, I think there might be a point that he was trying to dodge the SEC, thought that the Pac-12 might be better. Well, turns out Pac-12 is not where you're playing anymore, buddy. You're in the Big Ten now. And maybe it's a lack of caring. Maybe it's a just kind of disengaged. He doesn't want to do it if it's not flashy. Like, I don't know what it is, but he ain't it.
Well, that's what's so frustrating to me is that each year that passes on, it's like we strip away another possible excuse.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, no matter what it is, the defense, the defensive line, the physicality in the trenches. Oh, well, we don't have the right wide receivers and to help our quarterback. And we can't run the ball, so we need a new running back. I mean, it's like whack-a-mole. Every time you watch him try and address an issue, something else pops up. And for me, it's like, okay, well, the buck stops with you at this point. You're 4-8 in your last 12 games, and some of those losses are heinous losses. I mean, not just against like teams like Penn State where you found a way to fumble the bag, but just a waste of talent. And I don't know. I'm frustrated with watching. I don't care about USC football one way or the other. I mean, I'm not a USC fan. I'm not invested in them. This frustration is not born from any tie to the program. I just think it's a criminally under talked about topic. Like when we give Ryan Day or Dan Lanning last year crap about, hey, you made terrible late game decisions and you can't win the big game. And I think there's validity to all of that criticism, but I would just like to see Lincoln Riley held to the same standard as some of these guys, because he's, cool guy Lincoln out there in his Los Angeles mansion. It's frustrating to me. So anyway.
And he can't grill steak.
And he has no idea what he's doing.
He doesn't know how to do brisket.
No idea what
to
to
do anything, man.
Well, let's go down to brisket country, shall we? Let's go down to the Texas State Fair. They're frying everything. I'm sure you could find fried brisket. I tell you what, I think the Sooner fans would like to find all the fried beer they could, because this one was it wasn't over.
Were they selling
early.
Fried quarterbacks?
It wasn't over early, but you could tell which direction this was going. And Garrett, we were all talking in our group text. Trey took the Sooners here. He was trying to give the case for why Oklahoma was gonna cover here. And I think after 2 or 3 drives, once Quinn completed a forward pass, it was like, yeah, now I think it's going to be over. And sure enough, 34-3. Tyler, we'll give you the first crack here. Ahead of the game, hosting Georgia, what did you take away from this Red River rivalry at any point? Because it felt like after maybe the first quarter, like I said, you could just kind of see, I don't know that Oklahoma is going to give much of a real concerted effort here.
Yeah, Quinn came out, did exactly what he did last year in the Red River game, and he threw a pick, and that was the only way that Oklahoma was going to be able to keep this game close, was to get turnovers and win the turnover battle, and they couldn't even turn that one into points. And you kind of knew, even almost then, like this, you could be in trouble here, and Texas didn't score for the first quarter. They go on that avalanche in the second quarter where they score a touchdown, they get the ball back, then they have the fumble recovery for the touchdown. Hawkins fumbles, very next play, another rushing touchdown. So it just kind of hit Oklahoma like haymakers all at once. And I think from that point on, Sark looked over at the other sideline and he saw Michael Hawkins as a quarterback. And he's like, we're not going to be beat. I mean, they may get another touchdown. They're not going to put up enough points to beat us where we're at right now. Mm-hmm. We got Georgia next week. So I'm not saying he, just kind of rested his guys, but like, let's just call vanilla Blaze. Let's just get ready for next week. Make sure everyone's healthy. If you got any sort of like, tenderness in your hamstrings or whatever, get on the bench, get some ice on it. I think he just played it pretty safe. I've always been worried about Texas next week because they've always played terrible after the Red River shootout. And then, of course, this year it's Georgia. So their season is going to be coming down to the regular season is going to come down to that game next week. And so I think obviously it's a big win. I mean, anytime you beat Oklahoma, anytime you beat your rival, but I just think it was a pretty easy effort today for Texas to taking home a 31-point victory.
I think what was most impressive from this was Trey Wisner coming out of the woodwork, right? And the broadcast was talking about why hasn't he been the starter the whole year? 13 carries, $118 and a touchdown. It felt like anytime Texas needed a first down, anytime they needed an explosive play, like after a turnover, you have the Taylor Tatum fumble, the Michael Hawkins fumble, just hand it to Wisner and he's going to find the end zone or at least get you down close to it. I think Texas is going to need that running game next week and certainly the rest of the season to continue to protect Quinn, because early on when Oklahoma knew, okay, Quinn's going to have to make a statement here, we're going to pin our ears back and go get the quarterback, they found ways to make him uncomfortable. As good as that Texas offensive line is, when the Sooners early wanted to go get after Quinn, they could make him uncomfortable. Now, it's not like Texas has a gauntlet of a schedule the rest of the way, but Georgia this upcoming week, Texas A&M at the end of the season, that's obviously shown they can get after the quarterback. And then once you're into the playoff, hopefully our system is designed in which, the teams that make it might know what they're doing as far as a pass rush element goes. So I think that was the biggest win for Texas. I think health is another big win. Jake Majors goes down at one point with what looked like it was going to be a gnarly tweaked knee, and Texas was going to lose their center for a second consecutive year in the Red River rivalry. He ends up popping right back up. So I think the health in a running game for me, and maybe a bonus, the fact that Georgia looks extremely mortal. I mean, we'll talk about their game in just a minute in much lesser detail, but holy cow, if Texas can just focus and not allow a hangover to hit for too many days after this win, I think the Longhorns are all systems go.
I want to go with you on that. The only thing that I'm kind of watching Texas, but I'm not concerned. I'm not saying that this is a fault in Texas, but something to keep your eye on is the slow starts, right? Like they didn't start very fast against Mississippi State a couple weeks ago. That game was like 14-3 late in the third quarter. I know they scored before the quarter was out, but that was 14-3 pretty late in the third quarter with them. And then they turned it up and, it didn't look very competitive against Mississippi State. But that game was closer than it looked for a while. And then again today, I know Quinn was coming off the injury. And that was something we brought up was, game speed versus practice speed. And then your shoulder feeling good versus like what happens when you get hit the first time. All of that stuff, right? Everything about feeling good and, the abdomen and everything. Like we knew he was going to come back out there and he was going to have to get back up to speed. It was just a question of how fast. He throws the early pick. You maybe start to worry. And they were kind of slow for the first quarter, not good. They score the touchdown, but then not a whole bunch else in that second quarter until those last couple minutes where everything spirals out of control for Oklahoma. And, it's fumble city. And then, go chase that ball in the back of the end zone and fall on it for the touchdown. And, that was very quickly out of hand for Oklahoma, when I think a lot of Oklahoma sideline are saying, all right, well, let's just get off the field right here and, maybe take it into the half as a 4-point game. And all of a sudden it was 18 points. You're in the hole. Thanks for coming out. I'm a little concerned about the slower starts for Texas. They're going to have to get off to faster starts because they can't get down to Georgia. I don't think that if they fall in a hole and become one-dimensional, they can go down to Georgia and find the comeback, right? We haven't really seen them play from behind this year. And so if Georgia comes in there and lights it up in the first quarter and Texas looks up and it's 14-0, that may be a place where we have to say, well, is Texas in trouble? Where do they go from here? And maybe they can. I don't know, right? I'm not saying that this is a problem, but it's something to keep your eye on with this Texas Longhorn squad. When they're playing well in that second half of the game and when they really find their stride in that middle part of the game, it is all systems go, like you were saying. Like they're off to the races, name your score, right? It's just about how long it takes to kind of click that in. I don't know if that's a coaching thing. I don't know if it's the players on the team and, finding the fit or whatever it is, but they're going to have to get off to faster starts against a team like a Georgia or against, an A&M at the end of the season.
The first quarter when they trailed 3-0, that's the only time this season they've been down. They've led every other opponent the entirety of their game. Tyler, I don't know if you're concerned about that. I mean, again, Georgia, I don't know that they've lit the world on fire. I've got a number of concerns about the Bulldogs. But no doubt, Quinn showed some rust today. I thought he worked through it, though, by the time the game was over.
Yeah. I mean, that's the problem with Georgia. Like, they're not necessarily starting fast either. It was 3-0 through the first quarter of their game against Mississippi State. Obviously, we saw how they started against Alabama. So that first quarter definitely will be interesting next Saturday night. But yeah, I mean, I kind of expected a little rust from Quinn, obviously coming off the injury. But again, I just think it was such an easy cruise to a victory for Texas today, which you don't normally see in the Red River. And it was kind of strange. And they just, you look on the other sideline, and man, at one point I was just feeling so bad for Oklahoma's defense. And I know they just kind of got bludgeoned there at the end of the second quarter, but I mean, they were hanging in there and just getting absolutely no help from their offense. Obviously, you know, they had all the top 5 wide receivers out, which is a killer, but when you don't have a guy who can even attempt to throw the ball down the field and try to push the ball down the field, that's just a major issue. And I know they had another guy sitting on the sideline over there that, you know, he plays in a game against Tennessee, who's a good team. And he had the deer in the headlights look. Maybe he's learned from that. Why not give that 5-star, the guy you believed in during fall camp from the beginning, game 1, why not try to go back to him when you're just not getting anything from the other guy? I didn't understand it.
That was my final question for this game is what on earth was behind the decision to not go back to Jackson Arnold? And I put that out on Twitter at one point. I think there was a Sooners fan said, you know, the wide receivers aren't getting any separation. It won't matter anyway. To me, that's if your head coach is thinking like that, that is the ultimate loser's mentality. Oh, well, we're getting beat on the perimeter, so what's the point? You got to try something different. And that reverse counter that Oklahoma kept running where they sprint one way and then hand it to the running back going the other way. Like, how many times was that actually supposed to work? Because it felt like Oklahoma went to that well like 25 times over the course of this game. They had no downfield passing attack. Hawkins had no idea what to do with the football anytime he got outside of the pocket. Like, it was like the ball was strapped to his hands. If it wasn't a first read, get the ball out immediately. He had no eyes downfield looking for wide receivers. He kept running out of bounds way behind the sticks when he could have just thrown that ball away. To me, and again, we're not in those meeting rooms. We're not at practice. We don't know how Jackson Arnold is handling being benched. But when the broadcast is saying, yeah, we talked to the coaching staff and he's preparing like he's the starter and he's engaged and he's in every meeting and he's taking every rep like it's a game rep, what do you have to lose? You lost by 31 to your biggest rival. You got a flag planted on a jersey of yours at midfield. Like, how is giving Jackson Arnold a chance to rectify that in the third quarter not at least an option? And he got asked about that. Venables did in the post-game press conference. Did you ever consider going to Jackson Arnold? No. They were going to ride or die with
it was
Hawkins.
the same at the half. They asked him at the half. They sent whoever it was on the side. They sent her down there to go ask him. And she's like, you're going to make a switch? And he's like, no, he's our guy. And what that
when he said he's done okay, that was literally, he kind of shrugged. He said, no, he's done okay.
But here's my thing. That either tells you that, number one, there's something that they're not telling us because it's an internal professionalism thing. Like, you know, Arnold's got a serious issue with him that's not going to get fixed, and that's why he's not playing, right? It could be something like that. Or this is just like coaching malpractice to not even try something different.
Yeah, I mean, Herbie on the broadcast said from everything like you guys are talking about, from everything he has heard, he's been involved in everything. And so it was just weird. And yeah, to not even give it a shot, it's head scratching.
It is. LSU.
They are rushing the field in Baton Rouge.
29-26, guys. Right before kick, I switched my pick from LSU plus 3.5 to Ole Miss. Points. That one's going to
stuck with the Tigers. Don't bet against the Tigers on a Saturday night in Baton Rouge.
I wasn't really betting against the Tigers. I was more betting against their injuries and Brian Kelly.
Ye of little faith.
I have no faith in Brian Kelly in a big game.
Sure.
That is well documented.
Yeah.
That is a financially advantageous position. Perfect segue. Red River was a disaster. We can move on to the rest of the SEC slate. Alabama 27, South Carolina 25. We've got Tennessee beating Florida in overtime 23-17, and then LSU just knocked off Ole Miss 29-26. Tyler, I give guests dealer's choice. So out of those three games, which caught your eye? Which did you have a takeaway from? Run with it.
Well, you guys know my co-host, Lance. He's a big Alabama fan. So he's, I got to talk about Alabama, South Carolina. And that was the noon slate. When you looked at it on paper was a weaker slate. You were kind of getting ready for the 3:30 slate. And I just feel like Alabama, this is what the fans of Alabama, they're going to get used to this, because if you look at, and Lance sent me a screenshot today, if you look at even last year when he was at Washington, the results in his games, it was all within, you remember last year, Washington had a ton of one-score games with teams like Arizona State and Stanford and just a lot of those Pac-12 teams. And I think it's going to carry over, at least for this year, maybe even next year, where he's going to play really good. They're going to play really good in big games. If they're ever an underdog, he's going to play well. And if they're big favorites, it's going to be tight. And you better just buckle up and get ready for it. To me, this feels different than last year's 2-game set, when they played Texas and they lost, and then they went to USF and just looked terrible. And then the next week they turned it around and beat Ole Miss at home. This just looks different, and it feels different. It just doesn't feel like the same type of player at Alabama. The same, obviously the stuff with Malachi Moore went on last week. And Lance even talked to me today, and he just said, stuff like that, players just wouldn't have ever even thought about doing that with Nick Saban on the sideline. So the fact that they're even thinking about it and doing it says that the respect level is not there yet. Even the guys that stuck around, it's just not there yet. The intimidation factor for Alabama is completely gone. Obviously, that run that they had, that was incredible. And the dudes they were trotting out there on the offensive and defensive line, like DJ Fluker, just guys who were just beasts.
Yeah.
That intimidation factor is gone. And they just, again, I don't know if this is coaching or not, but when it's 20-19 and the other team doesn't have any timeouts and it's under 2 minutes and you catch the ball, you just got to go down. And you got to make sure your player knows that. But for the fact that he scored and then they allowed them to go all the way down. It's not like South Carolina's a juggernaut. This Ole Miss team held them to 3 points last week.
Yeah.
And we talked on our episodes this previous week. There wasn't anything South Carolina was showing anybody that they could do. And again, though, Vandy showed everybody the blueprint on how to beat this Alabama defense. And it's up to Kane Womack to try to make adjustments. And so far, he's not really doing it.
Alabama cannot handle a mobile quarterback. And gosh darn it, Lenora Sellers isn't even a good one. There were so many times today, not to just rain on Beamer Ball, but it's over, guys. Beamer Ball's ship, I think, has sailed. I really don't understand what the vision is even more in Columbia. And that stinks for a South Carolina program that has really loyal fans and a great home atmosphere. And there's just zero juice behind that program right now. That offense with weapons like Nick Harbor, who run record-setting land speeds, man, and you can't find a way to use him more consistently than the one throw that I remember him catching, which was a big one, obviously. It nearly tied the game. Yeah. But that offense, it feels like there's a lot of wasted opportunities. Rocket Sanders was running so hard today. When they did have an explosive play, it was Rocket Sanders like running over a guy, getting loose in the flat, making a man miss. I was really proud of the effort that he had, but yeah, Sellers just missed so many throws today. Tyler, to your point, Alabama was getting out-physicaled. And it's a good South Carolina front seven. So the offensive line having some struggles and giving up sacks early, it was like, okay, I know this isn't, a legendary Alabama offensive line. Georgia doesn't have a legendary offensive line either. So it's kind of like both teams are in this weird limbo where they're trying to figure out how to protect their quarterback. But when their defensive line at times was struggling to get to Lenoris, and they made a bunch of impact plays late in the game, but there were a number of times where it just felt like, okay, if Lenoris had made that throw, Alabama's in trouble. Their secondary didn't stand up to the test. Their linebackers, their safeties, and run protection, run stopping, I should say, missing tackles left and right, missing reads. You're right. It just doesn't feel like a normal Alabama program. But counterpoint, I wonder if that's okay. Not because they should be trying to get away from Nick Saban and the legacy that he left, but it's impossible to replicate that, right? Like it was bound to see some sort of regression away from an all-time great. And now it's on Kalen DeBoer to go in and figure out, okay, how do we fix those trouble spots? Am I wrong there?
No, you're right. Like in the summer, I said, if you're going to get Alabama, this is the year to get him because he'll get it fixed. He's a good coach, but he's out there with his offensive line specifically, and he's trying to run his offense that he ran with Washington, and they have just a completely different offensive line. He's got absolute road graders up there right now. And when we talked about it early in the midweek episode, how do you neutralize a pass rusher? You run the ball right at him. And they did it for the first drive. And then after that, you didn't see them trying to run the ball a lot. And I don't know if Nick Sheridan is panicking too hard and trying to just throw long bombs. But again, like I said earlier, if you've got Jalen Milroe and Ryan Williams as really your only threats on offense, and if you can just neutralize Ryan Williams, what can that Alabama offense do? Jalen Milroe can make plays with his legs, but if he gets neutralized as well with a pass rush, DeBoer's got to figure out a way. He's got to either get guys on into Alabama who are tailored to his offense, or he's got to switch his offense up and switch his scheme up and tailor it to the guys that Alabama can get, because they're going to be in the running for 5-star athletes, but all those 5-star athletes may not be fitting his scheme on offense and defense that he wants to run.
I think that's an astute point. I think personnel-wise, he's trying to fit square pegs into round holes, right? And, on college football 25, you can do that because, hey, a 5-star athlete's a 5-star athlete. But in the real world, I think that's a great point. And it is evident watching these coordinators try and scheme up what their normal play calling regimen might be, and guys trying to adjust on the fly and catch up to that. It's just a learning process, right?
Yeah, I always say the game really starts after the offensive script is over.
Yes.
And not everybody's like Sark and they script 40 plays. It's usually 15 to 20 plays. And when it's done, then you get to see how teams are. And if you look back at that Georgia game, I mean, they had 21, 28 points within the first 20, 25 plays, right? Yeah. And then when it broke down and Sheridan had to call plays off the cuff, we saw a different type of Alabama offense. So their scripted offense is great. A lot of teams' scripted offenses is great. Notre Dame looks great on every first drive of every game. And then after that, Riley Leonard can't throw the ball down the field. So it's just you've got to be able to adapt and figure out a way to get your playmakers in space.
Yeah. Garrett, let's go to Tennessee and Florida. We'll pick up the pace just a little bit. Tennessee outlasts Florida 23-17. The Vols got to feel really good that it may seem like they're turning the tide a little bit on this history. On this rivalry history, I should say. Florida has dominated this, but there is a clear watershed moment where Tennessee is a program going in the right direction. Florida, maybe not so much, but still, the Gators keep it close on the road. They hold Tennessee scoreless for the second consecutive first half. Arkansas did that to them last week. This time, though, Tennessee's able to make some adjustments. They come back in the second half. Heupel was 1-12 in games when they trailed at the half. So they get a win on the board.
Now he's 2-12.
Now they're 2-12. Every journey starts with a single step. For me, I took away two things. One, I was proud of the way that Tennessee continued to run the football in the second half. It wasn't like they had a big deficit to overcome. But Dylan Sampson running the football is one of their best assets. Two, I thought DJ Lagway really felt like he came into his own as maybe QB1 of this organization. I mean, Graham Mertz tweaks his knee. I haven't seen an injury update on that after he threw a touchdown pass, but I think it was Lagway the rest of the way after Mertz came out. So what did you see from Tennessee, Florida? What'd you like? What'd you dislike?
Well, what I like is that Tennessee is a running team, and I think we have to acknowledge that. I know that in the past we've seen them throw the ball up and down the field and turn it into a track meet. That's not what this team is. This team is a running team, and that was made clear because Nico is struggling right now. He's struggling against teams that he probably shouldn't. And you can say all that you want good about Florida and all you want good about Arkansas last week. Nico hasn't looked good in a little bit. And now that they're finally playing talent and they're playing top level teams, and I don't even know why I'm saying that about Florida and Arkansas, but now that they're playing anybody with kind of a sort of pulse in the SEC, he's kind of getting exposed. I mean, in my opinion, got outplayed by both quarterbacks for Florida. And if it wasn't for a guy like Dylan Sampson, you're probably looking at another loss for Tennessee. And thank God Tennessee can run the football, because that's the thing that Bama can't really stop. And so you're looking okay if you're looking to next week and starting to wonder about your options there. So I guess, if you're trying to draw any silver linings, you may have a little bit more time to figure it out. And Bama certainly hasn't looked all that great recently. So maybe you can, hang your hat on that. For Florida, I mean, look, I know that they have the tough schedule. This felt like one where on a tough schedule, you have to find a way to close this game out. If you're Billy Napier, you have to find a way to, if you're in one of these games, and he hasn't done enough quite to save his job, but he's coaching a lot better to this point in the season than I thought he would. And there's some games on the schedule that might be a little bit more attainable than we thought they were preseason. But this is still a spot now where he needs to find ways to close these games, because in my opinion, they should have gone for 2. I thought they should have gone for 2 there, because I didn't want to see Tennessee in an overtime situation. Not at home, not in that situation for Tennessee. Tennessee has everything going for them. If you're Florida, you're on the road, you have all the momentum with you. Go run some kind of rollout play, see if you can find someone open. If not, DJ tuck it and, go find 3 yards. And I don't know, man. It just felt like they should have done that. Didn't feel like they had the killer instinct there. And, maybe this is what comes back to bite Billy Napier in the end. But for me, it's survive in advance for Tennessee. You get to go fight another week. Looking at the SEC standings, I paused it at the end of that LSU game because I wanted to talk about that too. The SEC standings are drunk right now. You've got Texas A&M on top of the conference right now at 3-0. Texas and LSU both at 2-0. Georgia at 3-1, and then a bunch of 2-1 teams. You got Arkansas, Vanderbilt, Alabama, and Tennessee. By the way, Arkansas and Vanderbilt holding those tiebreakers right now. Just the way we drew it up in the preseason. The big thing I'm taking away from this right now is there is a real reshuffling of the SEC in the post-Nick Saban era. There's some real issues with certain teams that I thought maybe looked a lot better. There's some culture issues at Georgia, by the way. Want to bring that one up. You see Kirby Smart shoving the Mississippi State quarterback. Yeah. I'd have had a little sit down if I'm the AD over there and say, hey, man, stop it. You can't do that. That's borderline illegal. You can't put your hands on the student athletes like that. But yeah, I am really interested to see where the SEC goes in this back half of the season, because I don't think we can say anything with that much certainty right now outside of Texas has looked really good. LSU kind of found a way to play defense tonight, and the Aggies are unblemished at the moment. Then they're off this week, obviously, but we don't have a whole lot of certainty right now in the SEC, and big games next week for Georgia and Alabama to kind of prove who they are.
Mm-hmm.
I think that those are all good points. Man, I think there's a lot of potential land and territory to claim in the new look SEC, right? And we don't have to get into a transfer portal discussion, but I think one of the positives that's come out of it is there is a lot more parity. That is just objective, right? There's a lot more parity up and down all the conferences, not just the SEC, but all the conferences. And I made a point on our recap show last week of saying, from now on, given the state of everything, if you're going to say that a conference is strong or a conference is weak, or just because a team lost to this team, that they're overrated, that conference isn't worth anything, you had better have watched the game to explain why. Because now more than ever, there are not fluke losses at the rate that there used to be. Now more than ever, you're going to be able to point to X's and O's and go, nope, there was the mismatch. That's why this team got it done. This group of players took advantage of whatever it is. And so I think you're going to have, hopefully, a lot more informed discussions going forward about college football. At least that's the hope.
That would be no fun, Mitch. Let's just keep throwing hot takes out there with no facts or anything.
Let's just do it in an informed manner. LSU 29, Ole Miss 26. Give me, I guess, real quick on this, because that was a chaotic game. I think both quarterbacks have a lot of flaws. Garrett Nussmeier doesn't always know where it's going. Sometimes Jackson Dart doesn't either. Give me kind of your prognosis, Tyler, for either of these two teams. LSU has found a way to get a couple of wins. Ole Miss now has found a way to lose a couple of games that they were leading in. Are you buying into LSU? Are you selling on Ole Miss?
Not buying into LSU, but unfortunately, Ole Miss with losses to Kentucky and LSU, that might be the nail in their coffin. On their 2 conference losses, so it's going to be tough for them to climb back into the championship picture to even get the auto bid.
Yeah.
And obviously they've got Georgia on deck as well. So I just think, like, with Ole Miss, Tennessee's been getting a lot of flack for their offense, right? And their offensive performance. When are we going to start talking about Ole Miss's performance? I mean, we're going to talk about them putting up just 27 against South Carolina, looking weak last week. Obviously 26 tonight, 23 in regulation. Again, 17 against Kentucky. I know Kentucky's a stout defense, but 17 at home off a bye. And so it just, I just don't know. I mean, this was a make or break game for Lane. And, you know, they brought a lot in from the portal. He's the portal king, right? They spent a lot of money down there on some guys. This was not what they had envisioned. And there's been a lot of talk already and a lot of chatter already about possible openings in Gainesville and who will be open for that job. So does he, I mean, I think Ole Miss will keep, they're stupid if they don't keep Lane Kiffin around for as long as possible. Sure. Right. But is he just kind of say, okay, if I can't get it done with these guys, like, it's just not going to happen here.
Yeah, there's a real chance that he's checked out and that he's already, you know, maybe mentally, maybe not officially, but mentally taken the Florida job if it's offered. And if he is, I can't really blame him. It's probably got better long-term upside than Ole Miss in terms of his facilities and what they have to offer. But I mean, I don't know, man. Like this, I don't even know what to say at this point about Ole Miss, because they come in, they dominate the portal, they dominate, you know, again, grabbing all the talent. And what do? They can't get past an LSU defense that's kind of trash, and they have a terrible night, you know, overall. They can't get anything going consistently. Jackson Dart, really not a great game for him. He, you know, completes about half his passes and, you know, throws a touchdown and a pick. Really wasn't that much of a difference maker. And yeah, like that's with a situation where Nussmeier throws 2 picks and a couple very ugly picks, by the way, that really had no business getting thrown where they were. And in a night where LSU did not really run the football. The leading rusher is Caden Durham with 37 yards. It's not a night where LSU is dominating on the ground. And that was even still with them kind of getting gifts. Like I was, you know, kind of keeping record of it in our, you know, private chat here backstage. But I mean, you know, they kind of got given a gift because LSU kind of went a little bit soft on the defensive side towards the end of that game and, you know, gave them a chance at a Hail Mary. And then, of course, they get sacked on the Hail Mary attempt. And then when they get to overtime, there were 2 picks dropped on that LSU defense that could have stopped it, turned it around, and now you get that. Instead, you don't even take advantage of your 2 picks. You just, you know, kick your field goal, and then when LSU scores their touchdown, that's it. This is just not a very good Ole Miss team. But I think we were kind of wondering, like, okay, well, is Kentucky a great defense? Is that what happened? Or, you know, maybe South Carolina just came in with the right game plan. They're still reeling. Who knows? I just think we got to say, yeah, maybe Ole Miss really isn't that good. I'm not entirely in on LSU. I think they're better. They got a good offense. They can score points, but I'm just not really in with what Ole Miss is doing. I think I'm willing to pronounce a time of death. Maybe I'll let SEC Shorts do that one, but I want to pronounce a time of death on the Ole Miss season.
I think for Ole Miss, what they're going to rue is the 5 field goal attempts tonight. Caden Davis goes 4 or 5. He misses the first one, which was a chip shot. Missed that one, does make the next 4. But the fact that you took 5 field goal attempts, Ole Miss moved the ball at will up and down the field. They could get into LSU territory, no problem. But when it came to getting inside the red zone or getting all the way into the end zone, it was just a real struggle for Ole Miss tonight. Even worse, they now have to go sit on that loss over a bye week. So I think you're gonna really see what Ole Miss is actually made of in a couple of weeks when they come out. Their next game is against Oklahoma. They will be at home hosting the Sooners, but at Arkansas versus Georgia, at Florida versus Mississippi State, there's probably another loss somewhere on that. I'd be shocked now if they go 10-2. You kind of lost your freebie against Kentucky. So, 9-3 could get it done, but with the quality, quote unquote, of some of those losses, I don't know. I don't know that Ole Miss is a team that I'm banking on getting into the playoff. Talked about Georgia and the concerns that I have. 41-31 over Mississippi State. Mississippi State looked a lot better in this one. I think Michael Van Buren might be something at quarterback for the Bulldogs. For me, though, the comment I'll make, I think Georgia has some serious issues in the trenches. They're not able to protect the quarterback. They're not able to get to the quarterback defensively, rushing 4 or 5 like they have in the last couple of years under Kirby Smart. They're really having to scheme up concerted blitzes to get to the quarterback, and then that's when their secondary's been hurt a little bit. So I'm concerned about them going into Austin. Guys, honestly, just if I had to throw out a number for how many points I think Texas wins by, I'm shocked to tell you I think Texas could win by 14-17 next week. Like, that's the number that comes out first. Maybe I'm crazy, but that's just the first thing that comes up is Texas by 17.
Yeah, you got to think Kirby, he's going to have his guys ready. They're going to be underdogs. That's the role he loves.
Yeah.
He thinks everyone's going to tell him they're going to go 7-5 again, right? So he relishes that. But again, I've been on them for a couple of weeks ever since that Bama game, and even before that, their offense has looked lost without Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey.
Yeah.
I don't trust their playmakers at all, even though in the second half of that Bama game, we kind of saw more Dylan Bell and Dominic Lovett. But again, like you said, can't run the ball. You can't get pressure with 4. In that Bama game, they looked slow in that first half compared to them. And Texas, I think, is probably just as fast. They have just as much speed as Alabama. So if they're not careful, it could get ugly. But like we saw, against Alabama, they've got the firepower to come back.
Yeah, Georgia can't run the football, which is going to be their big issue playing Texas, is if you can't be balanced and you let that Texas defense pin their ears back, you're going to have issues. But look, Carson Beck is kind of figuring it out. Like, I wasn't super impressed, with sort of what he was able to give us towards the beginning of the year, but like he's kind of figuring it out, and he's turned into a real slinger. I mean, he throws for 459. I'm not predicting him to go 400 plus against Texas, but if he can put up 300 plus against Texas, I think they're in this game. And as long as you have a quarterback who's back there, who's kind of fearless and can keep, throwing the ball down the field, push the ball down the field, letting his playmakers go do something. Again, I think it's going to come down to who starts the fastest in that game against Texas, because neither of these teams have really gotten off to a quick start. So whichever one of them can make the thing kick into gear first, I think probably ends up winning that game.
I agree. All right, let's run down just a couple of headlines throughout the rest of college football. Over to the Big Ten, Iowa dominates Washington 40-16. My brother-in-law is an Iowa student. I was texting him. I was like, man, you guys got to be loving this, right? He's like, yeah, we didn't see this coming at all. Caleb Johnson runs for 166 and 2 touchdowns. Feels like Iowa has a decent offense that's emerging. Now, they still can't really score against ranked opponents, but I thought it was a positive step in the right direction for an Iowa team that has just lacked an offensive identity for so long. Wisconsin also explodes onto the scene with an offense. Last week against Purdue, they put up 52. This week, they hang 42, not 72, 42 on Rutgers. Tawee Walker, 198 yards and 3 scores. Good for Wisconsin and Phil Longo, getting some offensive juice going with Braden Locke, the backup quarterback, leading the show. I've been impressed with Wisconsin. And then we talked about Illinois absolutely surviving against Purdue. Anything else catch your attention, Tyler, from the Big Ten?
No, I just don't know what world I'm living in when Iowa and Wisconsin are putting up 40 points a game in the Big Ten. Illinois, you got to think maybe they started looking ahead when they were up 27-3 to that game against Michigan next week. Yeah. But Iowa, you still look up and I mean, McNamara completed 8 passes for 108 yards. You're like, how in the world they put up 40 points? Well, they got themselves a defense. They got themselves a running back. And that was a prime letdown spot for Washington traveling across the country after that big win last week. So, status quo in the Big Ten, Iowa and Wisconsin winning some games.
Yeah. In the ACC, we've got the Rec rambling. And guys, this is my weekly spot where I ask Mac to retire, please.
Some
Mac,
beach somewhere.
just hang it up, maybe. Georgia
There's an
Tech wins.
umbrella drink with your name on it, Mac.
I will give North Carolina credit at home. Once again, they're trying not to go 0-3 in conference play. They tie it up. They come back, tie up Georgia Tech, and then like 2 plays later, give up a 65-yard jaunt to Jamal Haynes with 17 seconds left. Haynes has 170 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. I mean, any way that North Carolina can find a way to lose a game this year, I believe they dropped to 1-5. Am I making that up? They've found a way to do it. And I don't know what North Carolina's future is at this point. Like, if you're a recruit, you have to know that Mac Brown is not going to be the coach next year. So what's the point of coaching out these next 6 games unless I don't know what the unless is. I think North Carolina's in a rough spot.
Yeah, and it's a rough spot, and again, a conference with a little bit less than certainty on its future. And I know that that's maybe the controversial offseason take for this, but it's just a really rough spot to be in right now, and sort of this middle to bottom of the ACC, where you kind of got to ask yourself, like, what are your priorities? A lot of these are basketball first schools, and it's not to say they don't care about their football programs, but it is to say that they've got to make better investments and a little bit more of a bold move if they want to get back on top of this. And it's just time to hang it up for Mac.
Yeah, they are dead last right now in the ACC.
Yeah.
North Carolina, NC State, and Cal are all 0-3 in the ACC.
Gosh.
You know who's not 0-3 in the ACC is Pitt. They're 6-0 for the first time since 1982. A little bit of a nervous knee knocker against Cal. They win 17-15 over a Golden Bears team that didn't have Jaden Ott. Pitt's bowl eligible. Tyler, I don't know if you guys had a strong opinion on Pitt. I was of the persuasion that maybe Pat Narduzzi's system had lost its luster in the preseason. Boy, I look like an idiot now.
I mean, we were kind of indifferent on Pitt. I don't know if anybody saw them being 6-0, but I mean, if you just look at their results, they are skating by, and they are not very highly power rated in all the power ratings. They've got Syracuse coming up on I believe a Thursday night in a couple weeks, and they got to go to SMU. They still got Clemson on the schedule. I don't foresee this luck continuing for much longer. Holstein was playing great until today. He looked terrible in that game. They didn't score the entire second half. They were lucky to hang on in that game against Cal today. So I'm not buying anything Pitt's trying to sell right now.
Well, let me go a little bit on the optimism there. Not to say that I disagree with anything you're saying, but let me paint the picture for Pitt for a second. You get a bye week to go and figure out whatever has gone wrong, get a little bit, healthy, rested up, hit that back part of your season. And there's some teams that look a little bit more beatable than they did look in the ACC. I'm not as impressed with Louisville as I had been. Virginia, maybe not as good as we thought, at some point. Boston College, maybe not quite as good. I mean, you could, find your way to a 10-2 and not even have to be that good if you're Pitt. And I want to live in a world where Pitt's 10-2.
I think there's a legitimate chance they could lose all 4 of their next 4.
There is.
Syracuse on the Thursday night at SMU, which, oh my gosh, that homecoming ticket suddenly has huge monetary value. I don't know if I want to go to that game or not. Virginia, I actually think is better than what a lot of I don't know. It seems like people are catching on that Virginia is kind of fun offensively. They've got a little bit of a spark. They almost beat Louisville today, which that was my outright upset pick in the ledger. And then Clemson, which started a little slow and then just baptized Wake Forest as that game went along. So yeah, I think the Cinderella story for Pitt's about to come to a screeching halt. But hey, 6-0. You can't take that away from
believe in Mitch. Come on. Don't do that to the Pitt fans. They're 6-0 tonight. Let them have their fun for the bye week.
Well, I'll tell you what, who else is 6-0? BYU. BYU, folks, is 6-0, and this might be the bellwether for Big 12 champion and beyond. If you beat SMU in September, historically you have really good success in the Big 12. TCU did it in 2022. BYU has done it now in 2024. In all seriousness, though, they absolutely dominated Arizona. It was close early, and then kind of similar to the Kansas State game, it was like a tidal wave of points all of a sudden for BYU. Arizona's making mistakes, and the Cougars were only too happy to take those free points.
I've been trying to tell y'all about BYU. I've been sitting here for weeks now saying, guys, BYU's actually kind of good. We're like, they didn't play anybody. I'm like, well, does Arizona count? Because Noah Fifita threw 3 picks. And that's a really good BYU defense that I want to keep on standing on and saying, like, no, this is a good BYU defense. And they run a real fun defense up there. It doesn't have to be explosive on the offensive side. They make opportunities for themselves. I've been trying to tell you guys. And then look at the rest of this BYU schedule for a second. Oklahoma State, not exactly looking very good. They got to go play them at BYU. UCF lost to Cincinnati. I don't want to talk about UCF all that. I mean, I understand there's the situation.
That was a fall from grace for the Knights.
But that was not good. They play Utah. I mean, even with Cam Rising, who may not play and may not exist, and we're not sure who he is exactly at this point. But even with Cam Rising, they didn't look all that good. Kansas has been a little disappointing. I mean, Arizona State might be a tricky one, but
is Arizona State the most legitimate team left on their schedule?
I think so. And they had to play them in Tempe, so that's a little bit tricky too. So that might be, but we could be talking about an 11-1 BYU in the Big 12 championship game at the end of the season. And again, talking about worlds I want to live in, I want to live in this world.
Yeah, they're another team that's 6-0, and they're another team that's lowly power rated, comparable to Pitt. Mm-hmm. But again, I am buying BYU. I'm not buying Pitt. I'm buying BYU.
Come on.
They've looked overall better. I know that Kansas State game, it looks a lot worse than it really was, but that Holy War on the 9th is going to be something to watch if Utah can kind of right the ship here in the next couple of weeks. I'm with you on the Arizona State game. Kenny Dillingham, it didn't take him long to get things corrected there in Tempe, and I just think BYU, I mean, looking at the schedule right now with 3 Big 12 wins and a win over SMU, I mean, that's a solid resume, and you're in the driver's seat for the Big 12 championship game.
Mm-hmm.
Also, can I real quick shout out, because you mentioned Dillingham, I want to shout out him for absolutely raging with the students after their win. That was so much fun, just watching his post game, like, no, this is what we're doing it for. And then all the students got up there, he's like, nah, forget this interview. And just started kind of raging. It was so much fun.
They need to go back to the athletic director and say, about that self-imposed bowl ban, can we move that? Because
we do that next year, maybe.
Yeah. Frustrating own goal there for Arizona State.
Yeah.
But I love the way they're playing football. They're physical. Cam Scadaboo is running the ball all over the place. He's great. Iowa State remains unbeaten in the Big 12 as well. Shame that they don't play BYU, but maybe that's a matchup that we're destined to see.
That's Arlington. Iowa State, BYU. Maybe 10,000 fans in the season.
It'll be a hot ticket.
Hey, we'll find
my way to that stadium.
Absolutely. Two action headlines that I had to get into the show because we've got MAC folks that listen. Buffalo upsets Toledo today, 30-15. The Bulls have now beaten NIU and Toledo and lead the MAC East. This is a Buffalo team that's under new management. Their offense at times has looked really shaky, and I don't know that there's much to hang their hat on, but the defense for the Bulls is legit. I was really proud of the way they jumped on Toledo early, didn't let up, and then NIU wins a low-scoring game over Bowling Green. That's a contenders battle in the West. 17-6. Bowling Green was up 7-6. They were leading the entirety of this game until the fourth quarter. The wheels fall off for the Falcons. You got to feel bad for Scott Loeffler, who his team is perpetually playing close games, and they cannot find a way to get it across the finish line. So I think the MAC will be fun to start watching here in Tuesday nights is it this week? Do they start on Tuesday this week, or is it next? It's coming up. It's coming up. Wives beware. There will be Tuesday night football going forward. I know how to explain that in detail to my wife. So, let's cap the show there. We've gone almost an hour and a half. Tyler, it's been a pleasure having you on tonight. Let the folks know where they can find you and Lance and your podcast, which is one of my favorite podcasts to listen to when it comes out, by the way.
Yeah, appreciate that, guys. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, on X at Always Talk Ball. We're on Instagram as well. We love the banter. We love people commenting on stuff and, getting into stupid college football arguments. Kind of what we live for during the college football season. So we love listening to you guys too. You guys are doing a great job over there. And I love this kind of little sports podcast network we've created here. And it's been a lot of fun. And college football never disappoints on Saturdays. So I appreciate you guys having me on, and it's been fun. We should do this again.
We absolutely will. Great having you. Yeah, definitely go follow them at Always Talk Ball on Twitter. Find them on their podcasts, Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Do y'all do YouTube? Yeah, y'all do YouTube.
Yep.
Right? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Perfect. So yeah, we'll absolutely do this again, and hopefully we can do it again after another crazy, chaotic weekend. It's been just college football paradise these last couple of weeks. We've got a couple more weeks, obviously, in store. Conference races. I'm telling you, they're going to be super entertaining this year, and we can't wait to go along that journey. Well, for Garrett Turney, Tyler Noe, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Until next time, so long, everybody.
Gracious, how about that?